So this is just in to CNN. A source confirming to CNN a federal grand jury investigating January 6th has subpoenaed the former White House counsel, Pat Cipollone. ABC News was first to report that. CNN has now confirmed that as well. Abby Phillip, David Chalian, Mark Preston, David Axelrod are all back with me here. Thanks so much for joining. This is big news. What say you, David Chalian?
Well, I think we've seen over the last couple of weeks this escalation in this grand jury process that is separate and apart from all of the DOJ investigations and prosecutions into those that actually stormed the Capitol and broke into the Capitol. This is now has been, and we've seen, as Pence aides have been called in and what have you, getting into the inner sanctum. Well, you don't get more inner sanctum than the White House counsel,
right,
who we know through testimony given to the January 6th committee, was running down the hall to the Oval Office to try and stop meetings from progressing, who was trying to get the White House chief of staff alive and awakened and engaged in what was going on the 6th. So I know that Cipollone and his team are going to go through a whole host of negotiations and conversations with DOJ about what he could say or what he can't say. But this is DOJ investigation, and this subpoena of Cipollone. This is as serious as a heart attack. I don't think DOJ is fooling around here at all, and I think this is going to be an investigation that is going to be with us for quite some time.
There was a negotiation with the House committee because the House is racing a clock. They needed to get what they're going to do done because they were concerned about the Congress turning over in January. The Justice Department will pursue him, and they're going to test this issue of privilege, because there is no privilege if it relates to the commission of a crime. And they will pursue it in a way that the House cannot.
And I think the question going forward will be, when they do pursue it and it goes to the courts, how quickly does it get resolved, even in these federal probes? Is in the past, some of the judges and some courts have taken a long time to come down in rulings about whether or not privilege applies to certain circumstances. A court that moves much more quickly could have this moving along. And I think either way, though, it puts Cipollone in a position that he wasn't in with the January 6th committee. He basically was able to go into a room with the January 6th committee and say, here's what I'm willing to talk about, here's what I'm not. And they were amenable to that. But it's not going to be that kind of situation when you're talking about a federal grand jury and when you're talking about federal crimes.
But you guys are right. Hold on, Mark. You guys are right, because they said that what ABC News is reporting, that attorneys for Cipollone, they're going to try to negotiate this like they did with the House Select Committee investigating the attack, which you mentioned here. They're expected to engage in these negotiations around any appearance while weighing concerns regarding potential claims of executive privilege. So you're going to have that dance.
As they should, though. I mean, for somebody who was, who's been in the West Wing and has been in that situation, like, there has to be some kind of privilege given to
that he is the former White House counsel.
Right, but to David's point, if there is a crime being commissioned, then there is no executive privilege. And what's interesting about Cipollone is that he's not a MAGA guy. He is somebody, who took a job, went in and did it, and was very open with the January 6th committee, which I was kind of surprised. I mean, again, he went and negotiated it out, but to have him come in and say some of the things that he did on videotape that were showed, during the hearings was amazing, I thought, and really helped make their case.
I want to get some legal analysis now when Ellie Honig joins us now. Ellie, when you look at what's happening now, Pat Cipollone, a federal grand jury subpoenaed the former Trump White House counsel, Pat Cipollone, for this investigation into January 6th. What does this mean?
Well, Don, Pat Cipollone is the ultimate insider, and I think we've seen that he was involved in or present for or a witness for so many of the key conversations. And generally speaking, his role was as a voice of reason, telling them, no, you can't take over the Justice Department. No, you can't get on board with this fake elector scheme. No, John Eastman's theories are not legal. They're not constitutional. And I think one of the big questions here, and I think Abby Phillip was just alluding to this, is how hard is DOJ going to push back against these executive privilege claims? Because if we think to Pat Cipollone's videotape deposition testimony, which we saw in some of the hearings, there were these moments where he was asked, what was your conversation with Donald Trump? Pat Cipollone would sort of pause, turn to his lawyer, a guy named Michael Purpura, who I used to work with at DOJ, and then Cipollone would just say, privilege, and he would not answer. So is DOJ willing to go to courts to force him to give those answers, or are they going to be able to negotiate some sort of point where they agree on what Cipollone will and won't give them. If they do go to the courts, though, A, that's going to be a very high stakes battle, and B, that could take quite a while. That could take months
Ellie,
and months.
I mean, this does escalate. This takes it to a whole new level. I mean, if you have the former White House counsel being subpoenaed here, this really ratchets things up.
Yeah, there's no question about it. I mean, when we add this to what we already know about who the committee is speaking with, I mean, this is a next level up from Mark Short, from Greg Jacob. This is the White House counsel. He's in all the rooms for all the big meetings. So this is, yes, another sign of just how serious and how focused DOJ is on not just the White House, but the inner sanctum of the Trump White House.
CNN senior crime and justice correspondent Caitlin Polantz is joining us now on this. This is a big deal that they'll be hearing from him.
Brianna, it really, really is. And for them to go after Pat Cipollone to try and lock down what he knew about January 6th just shows how serious, how significant this criminal investigation is into January 6th. So my colleague Pamela Brown, she was able to confirm last night a story first reported by ABC News that former White House counsel Pat Cipollone has been subpoenaed by the federal grand jury that is investigating January 6th out of Washington, D.C. And this sort of fact-finding step, it would be the sort of thing where prosecutors would want to talk to Cipollone probably about what he spoke to the House Select Committee about, but also what he was witnessing, what he was hearing in the West Wing, maybe things that the House Select didn't ask him about, other things he may have witnessed. And part of this, too, that Pam had learned when she was doing this reporting is that Cipollone and his attorneys are in discussions over access, over executive privilege, and whether prosecutors can actually get to Trump's statements themselves. That's something that we already know is a brewing fight, and a very important one at that, because people from the office of the Vice President, Mark Short, Greg Jacob, they've already been into the grand jury, and everything that they said, the only thing that they stopped at was being able to share what Trump himself was saying. And so the Justice Department is about to go and have a fight over possibly getting access to Trump's statements. That is something that could bubble up with Cipollone as well. And if we remember back at that House Select Committee hearing, what we've heard of Cipollone saying before is that the key thing he had said was that Trump was the only person in the White House who didn't want to tell rioters to leave the Capitol on January 6th. The House Select Committee made a very big deal about this. But even when Cipollone was testifying to that out at the House Select Committee, he was very hesitant to say exactly what Trump said and even to name Trump in that circumstance because he kept citing executive privilege. So this could be something that brings us to another court fight, but it really is an aggressive step by investigators to want to bring him into the grand jury and lock down his testimony.
Yeah, it was clear that unburdened by what he perceived was that executive privilege, he would have talked about it. So he would have a lot to say there. So we'll be watching this. Caitlin, thank you so much for the great reporting.